Please join me. My key might be wrong, but you got to take what you get. What a friend we have in Jesus, all our sins and griefs to bear. What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. We often forfeit. Oh, what Jesus made me
Thank you, and welcome back. If we can please find our seats right now, we're going to reconvene and continue our discussion on the finance plan. So if you could please find your seats, we're going to continue that discussion right now. Okay, if everyone can please find your seats, we're going to get started here. So we started our presentation on the financial plan, and I have Ken Workington here joining me on stage. I'm just going to invite Ken to come up here just to offer a few additional comments on the presentation that he gave. So if we can please have your attention, please.
Attention. I had made a statement at the end of my little presentation that I wasn't worried about, implying I wasn't worried about regional churches having shortfalls in their budgets over the next year. And some people were wondering what I was referring to or what I was saying. I will give an example. Mennonite Church, Saskatchewan, and besides what expenses we had in the last year, we've added into that process for an engagement officer $67,000 if we go through with this kind of a plan, and $7,000 of our extra travel costs for $74,000 extra to cover what was perceived as possible extra expenses. So that would sort of cover off if any shortfalls. And that's what all I was referring to.
Thank you, Ken. So the General Board moves the motion to commend to Joint Council the financial plan proposal. And so if I could have the motion presented on the screen, we'll now have an opportunity for you, the delegates, to speak into this. And if you wish to speak once again, please stand, and we'll have one of our ushers bring the microphone to you. And just a reminder that to allow as many people an opportunity to speak, that will limit your speaking time to 2 minutes. And please be also mindful of anything that has been already spoken, so that we allow opportunity for those who have yet to share with us new ideas or new ways of thinking to have that opportunity given to them. So the floor is open. As you speak, please say your name and the congregation you're from.
Good evening. Hope your meal was satisfactory. I'm Jerry Bruno from Langley Mennonite Fellowship Church and MCBC delegate. I don't want to belabor the point. I spoke a little bit about finances earlier. And but I just wondering, Ken or Matthew, if you could clarify that the plan that was identified, you know, where every regional church would make a contribution, is by agreeing to this proposal, are we agreeing to those numbers, or are we just saying we're agreeing to this plan and those numbers will be adjusted accordingly as we move along through the budgetary process? Right. Okay, so we will be moving into our budgetary process for MCBC probably in the next month for a budget to start in January of 2018, so there will be some ongoing discussion about how those numbers will all develop and mature in this process.
Great.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
My name is Subrata Chakrabarty from East Mennonite Church. I see a lot of concern about the budget to NC Canada, but when I look at the budget of 1.9, it's not the rigid number, but approximately 1.9 million. And then when I look at the number of people coming to church, about 31,000, then actually per head per year is about $65. It's not really something we should worry about. And I think we can grow from there.
Thank you.
Elmer Hildebrand, Bethel Mennonite, Winnipeg. One of the things I would like the committee to look at seriously is the future development of leadership. And I think I saw $20,000 allocated for that, and I think you should add a 0 to that.
I'm Judith Friesenepp from Home Street Mennonite Church. I'd like to ask a few questions of clarification about the Canada Witness budget line. I'm wondering if we're at a place where you could give us a little more detail on how that money is divided. As I understand, a camping ministry, engagement with newcomers to Canada, Indigenous settler relations is all sort of lumped together in that sum, if I'm reading the program guide correctly. I'm wondering if we're in a place where we can spell that out a little bit, how that will be divided up. I have two other questions related to that, so maybe I'll give them to you all at once. And then in the supplement that came out just this week, I noticed a dramatic change in that number. It went up about 66%. Is there a change in vision or strategy that's just come about in the last week that would explain that? And finally, a question about the Indigenous relations position. At one point in the sermon guide on page 33, it says something about reducing the national role to half-time, with remaining half-time for the staff person to be distributed among the Prairie Area Regional Churches. On page 39, you talk about a full-time national role in IR. So those are my questions for clarification.
Thank you.
You're not the first one that has questioned that. The half-time issue, we listened to the churches from that first proposal, and we put it back to the full-time amount. The $710,000 for international witness does not include Aboriginal or Indigenous affairs for here. Yeah. Some of that does, but we haven't specified it out exactly at all. And Indigenous isn't in Canada Witness. It's in a separate line. That is the line, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Get confused. Pardon?
So let me try to. I think the question was in the disparity between, at one point in the materials, it reflects a half-time national role in Indigenous, and then another part of the material, it talks of one full-time at a national role. So the original plan that was presented did have a half-time at a national level, and that the three prairie provinces would pick up the other half-time. And through the working group, there was a lot of feedback that was asking us to reconsider that, and so we did. And so now the plan is showing that, that Indigenous relations would be fully borne at the national level. We'd still be looking at how special animation may take place in the 3 prairie provinces, but so we did listen in that case to the strong feedback that came from the working group. And I think you had a question of the international witness line. No? Okay, so that was all right.
Gerd Heinrichs, Sherbrooke Mennonite Church, Vancouver, BC. I guess it's too much to comprehend, but for some reason it seems like to me we're going to be doing about the same amount of work that we did in the past, where we didn't meet the budgets, yet we don't seem to be doing anything to generate more income, and yet we're saying we're going to do it with an amount of money that didn't cover our needs before. So that's where my concerns are. We've talked about it a little before. I think as area and individual churches, we have to do things to make our congregants and our churches more aware of what the money is needed for, how it's going to be used, and why people should be giving more. We have to somehow encourage increased giving, because without increased giving, we're not going to make the budget again, no matter how you structure it, if we're going to do the same kind of work that we have in the past. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eyebrow, Saskatchewan. Just a question. It seems that we're doing a lot of voting in principle, and then you guys are going to do something afterwards. So it just seems like, I guess I just sit here thinking, what are we really voting on? And are we going to be voting again, or is it just all of a sudden something's going to be there? Yeah, I just, like, we're voting in principle to give it to you guys, and then what happens after that?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair comment and question. We're in the dynamic of wanting to show that we think this is doable, and that's really the spending plan and how we think we can pay for that. So it's not concrete numbers. It's done some very good work. So we've taken the historical giving patterns of congregations that have given to the area church and to the national church, combined that, and then said, we think this is doable, and we think it's a pretty safe projection of expenses and how we can pay for it. But we really do need to get this first year under our belt. As I think someone has commented before, will congregations do what we're requiring of them to do? And that's to combine the two numbers that they gave to the area church and they gave to the national church. We really need them now to combine that, and that all goes to the area church, the regional church. Then this will work, but we don't know. And many change consultants, will say, you would be foolish to think that you're going to get 100% of all that. Well, we're praying lots and appealing. We really need you to do that. But having said that, this is a I think it's a pretty conservative budget. We haven't factored in the wonderful generosity of individual donations. Not entirely. And so if the many generous people across the country, if they continue to give, we can do this, right? So part of it is, if everything goes well, then we'll be able to manage this. I think in principle, so then we're going to keep moving towards this, but what would happen now is that budget items and these decisions will will become the responsibility of the regional church and your delegates. So every regional church delegate now will speak to these pieces. Certainly the approval of the budget by the regional church as to what you're going to commit to paying for the shared nationwide priorities, that's going to have to be approved by the regional church delegates, right? And then you'll be instructing the Mennonite Church Canada delegates, which will now become regional church appointed. Your congregational delegates are going to be instructing those delegates how to vote and what to say, and your concerns. They're going to be carrying that into the Mennonite Church Canada delegate sessions. So everything still needs to come back to delegate approval, but it won't be in this kind of delegate assembly. It'll be through your regional church.
I'm way over here. Sorry, you might not see me. Kyle Penner from Steinbach, Grace Mennonite. Really similar question here, so you can probably answer this. If Grace Mennonite is giving $50,000 to 25 to MC Manitoba and 25 to MC Canada right now, so we combine those to 50, we give that to MCM. Are we also supposed to, in addition, find some money for that witness designated line? Because we're planning our budgets next month at our church, and they want to know how much money we want to give, and we want to give you money. But so we might come back from this delegate session saying we're supposed to give conference more than we have been, which is okay if you ask that. I just want that to be clear. Is that a fair question?
No, I'm glad you keep asking it because that means I get to keep answering it. It is really important that if Grace Mennonite has been giving $25,000 a year to Mennonite Church Manitoba, and they've been giving $25,000 a year to Mennonite Church Canada, and they've been giving $5,000 a year in a congregational partnership for witness work, it is really important that you combine those two $25,000 into $50,000, and you give absolutely $50,000 or more to Mennonite Church Manitoba, because they're now going to be responsible for what had been that $25,000 that you had given to Mennonite Church Canada. And it is important that you continue to give your designated witness partnership funding as well, in addition to that $50,000. So yes, ask that more time so that we're all really clear. Because
I think we're all clear now that you don't want any less money than you've received. Which is important to know, because if we have a conservative budget and we lowered the expected incomes, does that reflect our congregations? But you do not want us to give you 1 penny less.
We do not want you to give 1 penny less. Yes.
Am I the only one thinking this?
Thank you.
My name is Ron Rempel. Can you hear this? Is it on? Okay. Ron Rempel from the Sterling Avenue Church in Kitchener. I'd like to hear a response to the question that came from a gentleman way at the back here when he said, it appears to him as if we're going to be doing nationally in the future everything that we've done in the past. I don't think that's the case, but I'd like to hear the articulation from the front there. Like I did a little bit of research online on past full year financial reports. And if I have it correct, maybe I didn't have the right year, but budgets were in the 3-point-some million for the national program, right? So right now they're under 2 million for what's been allocated for national. So could you describe narratively what's going to be different at the national level? What's not going to be done at the national level? It'd be helpful to hear that.
Yeah, you are also very correct. This budget is a substantially less in activity than what Mennonite Church Canada as a national entity has been doing before. This does reflect an anticipated decrease in some international witness work. That budget is less than what we currently are. It is a decrease in our communications capacity. It is a decrease in our leadership development capacity. It's a decrease in the executive team function. So there is. I'm trying to. I don't think it's appropriate to speak specifically about staff roles. So that's why I'm trying to be more generic. So it is a. But it is definitely a substantial decrease. We won't be doing some of it. Some of it we've been saying will become the responsibility of the regional churches, and the moderators and the executive staff together have built this budget that gives the regional church the financial capacity to do that. So whatever we're saying, it becomes the responsibility of the regional church. We've also been saying that historically you've given this, your congregations have given this much to Mennonite Church Canada and this much to your area church. We're combining that, but we're not expecting all that to come. We're actually giving you, we're saying you should retain more of that because you have some additional responsibilities now as regional church. But as you said, it is over $1 million less as a budget.
There's no question that more is going to be asked from the regional churches. One of the things that we did put in that one line on church engagement was an increase for all of the regional churches in working with church engagement. And as we go around to individual congregations, and we have been doing that in Saskatchewan, and we're getting feedback from congregations of what they want to do. When people buy in and they're emotionally connected, our experience in general has been they give more. It's just a given. How much more we'll get, I really don't know, but we're working very seriously, and it's up to the regional church people to get out there and deal with the program that exists, deal with the potentials of new programs, and build that budget. I understand that when you look at these numbers, it's always difficult to see that this is not a budget. It's just an example of how we want to approach budgeting. And it gives you some idea, but it isn't exact amounts at all. And we will be working at that budgeting process from here on in.
Waldemar Neufeld, representing Emmanuel Mennonite Church in Abbotsford. Is that good? April, I said it right? Okay. I thought I should speak at least once because the church paid for part of my expenses to come here. So I want you to take note of that in a minute. So I personally have a lot of interest in the question of raising funds. And when my friend Jerry over there from Langley says he feels nervous about relying too much on that phrase in the documents here, brings nervousness in myself as well, because there isn't much of a track record within Mennonite Church Canada and the regions, as far as I know, to actively engage in so-called fundraising. You may have noticed, as many of us have, there's a lot of competition out there. And even though we decide here we've got a great thing going and members of our churches should be giving more, which is good rationale, but it's going to take more than that, because we are clearly beyond giving to a black hole. Perhaps 30, 40, 50 years ago in my younger years, there weren't that many questions asked. We just gave to a fund and trusted leadership to take care of it. But with the competition that's around us right now, I made a donation to a secular organization recently that's involved in healthcare, and I get a thank you letter with a calculator and enough return labels to last me, I think, until I hit the grave. But this is the reality that we're up against. And I think the challenge for us as a church will be not to look at this fundraising thing in a simplistic way. There needs to be a group set aside who have some expertise in the area and set out a strategy for all of the regions as to how we might do this. Very basic, in my opinion, excuse me, would be the need for the new administration to come up with very creative and visionary projects that will capture the attention of the donor community. We won't be raising more money because there's a call for it and we think we need it for something. It will need to be more targeted, and we need to keep that particular concept in mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave Bergen from Bethel Mennonite in Winnipeg. In a somewhat similar vein to what was just shared, I'm noting a significant assumption in the documents that the regions will carry more of the activity and therefore more of the expense for the work that we do together beyond the congregation. When I look at my experience in Mennonite Church Manitoba, and I have some awareness of the rest of the country, I think that with the exception of MCEC, none of our current activities have engaged a whole lot in fundraising activity. In other words, we don't have capacity at the ready to engage what we assume it will be launched early in this new year. We're only a few months away from that. So my concern is that our timeline needs very careful consideration, and our expectations financially will need to be adjusted realistically to that awareness as well.
Thank you.
Brian Siemens, Mennonite Church, Saskatchewan, and I'll premise my statement, I might be wrong, but this is how I understand things. I think one of the concerns that was noted in the Future Directions Task Force was a sense of ownership over what we did together, or shall we say a lack of ownership in certain areas over to why we're dealing with some of this stuff that we're dealing with today. And so by shifting church engagement to the area church, or regional church, sorry, is we're closer to the ground. And so I know it's tough to have a church engagement coordinator have to cover half the country and visit all those churches when I'm able to visit churches in Saskatchewan, Tim's able to visit churches in Alberta, and Gary can visit churches in BC, that our relationship at the regional level is closer to the congregation. And so how do we then, instead of just bringing the MC Sask agenda in those connections with the congregations, is we are obligated, maybe that's not the right word, we can joyfully bring the MC Canada agenda with us. And that, I think, is one of the new ways of envisioning how that is done. Yeah, we will need some time to transition. We've never done a finance camp or a donors campaign in Saskatchewan, to what I know. All of the organizations that are associated with us do, but we haven't as MC Sask. So yeah, you're right. We need some effort in that. Willard's completely aware of that. And there's intention to do that type of training. But I think because we in the area churches have a closer relationships with our congregations, that hopefully that will help with this transition.
Thank you.
Hi, Steph Chandler-Burns from Bloomingdale Mennonite in Ontario. I hate to beat this home, and I'm going to keep it real short, but I think there's still some confusion, especially online. We're being asked to continue giving along historic trends. I understand that. But I also understand from the conversations we've been having that historic trends have been dropping, yet the finances, the budget, or the financial guidelines, I guess, are assuming we will continue giving the same amount we're giving, but it's in decline. So how is this expected to work? How is that budgeted for? Is there a contingency plan for if things continue to decline as they have been historically?
The proposed outline of where we'll be heading with MC Canada is dropping that expenditure in half. That's one of the things that we're not expecting that ended. We're expecting a little more to stay with the regional churches. We're also expanding, planning is what Ryan just said about going out and fundraising more and making more closer connections with their congregations and see how that works. But the amount going to MC Canada is way down in what we're projecting here.
Jonathan Sealing, Vineland United Mennonite Church. My comment or question has a couple levels. First of all, social trends concerning institutions, whether it's political or social. The younger generation is less engaged or less invested, maybe even quite cynical about the possibility of institutions to do the work that everybody says they should do. And so the problem of already getting us to vote in a federal election is one thing. Getting us to donate money and believe that's going to go to the right causes, that's another. We've seen both in the last couple elections south of the border, but also most certainly in our recent federal election in Canada, the effort to engage younger generations, both to get them to vote and to fundraise, it involved a completely new approach. And I believe there have been a few comments, maybe not enough, that we want to engage the younger generations and we want to know how and we want to do that, and that our future somehow hangs in that. And so to bring together both the reality of a fundamental institutional shift or restructuring with the idea that if we no longer have this mechanism of a kind of a representative democracy as we used to in the past, there will be some, we want to hope that there's some means by using technology online to connect us in other ways that weren't possible a generation ago, so that on the level of identity, communication, agenda, there's something going. But on the level of fundraising, my brother here said $65 is all we need, and you can give more, he says. Trudeau seems to only want $15 from us, but in terms of, now the serious part of my question, since there seems to be no central fundraising mechanism for MC Canada, and that's being downloaded to the regional bodies exclusively, if I understand correctly, if there would be a coordinated effort to do a Trudeau-like email fundraising campaign, that would have to come from the regional churches. But isn't that something that we would want to coordinate on, and very soon, if that sort of individual giver on the $15 or $65 level, not necessarily on the congregation giving another $5,000, but really on that small amount, has that approach been, or that model for fundraising, has that been considered?
Thank you.
Hello, it's Adam Robinson again from Douglas Mennonite in Winnipeg. I'd like to speak to the Canada Witness portion of the budget, and I guess of the vision itself. I suspect that we may have, well, hopefully the fundraising will happen, but we may have yet more letting go than we realize to do in the future. And within that letting go, I hope that vision can be captured for some of the things that we'd like to do, but that we won't be doing perhaps immediately. So when I took up the working report and the proposal for Canada Witness, I do see the argument there for the Indigenous relations work going forward in a full-time position. It felt to me like there was a lot else that wasn't said that I was sort of wondering about. Surely are there other Canada Witness priorities that we might also have dreams about alongside, and that was sort of let go of in that process. Maybe we can't afford it all now, but I would like to invite a broader, maybe theological reflection in the process going forward on what Canada Witness is. That's sort of new language there, and alongside International Witness, I think we need that theological underpinning. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to test soon whether we're ready to call the question, so maybe we'll take one or two more questions and I'll ask that question.
If I can just make the correction, I never did say that, sorry, Gerd Heinrichs again, Sherbrooke Mennonite in Vancouver. I wasn't suggesting that we're going to do all the same and spend the same amount at the national level. I said the aggregate of what the area churches and the national church is doing doesn't seem to be much reduced, and yet we're expecting less money to do it. And that's where my problem is. We have to do something to generate the funds somehow. Just setting up a budget based on last year, I think we'll fall short.
Thank you.
Scott Brubaker's there from Rockaway Mennonite Church. I had a question about the contributions of the different regional churches and was wondering why MCBC seems to be proportionately less than the others. And it could be something I'm just not aware of. It looks like it's about 6.7% of their total income, while the others are 20 and 30 something.
Thank you.
So I will either claim responsibility or admit responsibility for the numbers. You can choose which one you prefer. It was actually quite a difficult process of putting all of those numbers together and pulling them from a variety of sources. And part of the current one that you have is a shift downward for MCBC from previous one, partly because of some mistakes that I made. When I was hired, I told people that I would have at least one big mistake, and I'd be curious as to what it was. This was probably that one. I kind of messed up in the numbers. The second thing that's going on is the way in which those numbers deal with budgeted deficits in the regional church's current budget, because we built the numbers part of the numbers out of the 2017 budgets of each of the 5 regional churches. 4 of the 5 budgeted deficits of various kinds, and the question was, how do you deal with that deficit in a way that's fair across the country? And an assumption was made that we would simply include in the calculation the total income that we arrived at from our various calculations and the total expenses from the regional church budgets, and not worry about whether there was a deficit in there somewhere or not. And so the net effect of this particular way of calculating the budgets, or the numbers, is that Mennonite Church Canada's budget bears the brunt of the projected budgets of the regional churches, which we could have a long discussion about what's fair, and the revision and our discussion of that, shall we say, led to some lengthy conversations about how to deal with that, and no resolution was reached. We spent quite a bit of time at our ESG meeting on Thursday. No consensus was reached, but a recognition that what we were doing there in terms of how we were treating the deficits in the regional church budgets was not quite right. And so there is actually some deep thinking that still has to go back into these numbers to figure out how to deal with the fact that every regional church except Saskatchewan budgeted a deficit. And it may or may not be the fact that Saskatchewan might have feelings about how those deficits were addressed, because there's actually an incentive there to have a deficit in the regional church budget, if you're being cynical, of something which none of us are. Especially not Ryan, that's correct. So there's some deep thinking that still has to be done, and that's part of the reason why, as we've been trying to state as many different ways as we can, and it's one of those stakes that I periodically pound in the ground when we're talking. That is not a budget you're looking at. That is a stress test to see if the system can maintain what we think we can do or what we think we need to do. It's a stress test. It's not a budget. There's way lots of work that still has to be done to fix those. And that's part of the reason why that number from MCBC looks difficult. I think I'll leave it there.
And maybe I'll just make a comment to some of the earlier pieces of the commitment, I think, in the operating plan that speaks to the commitment of the regional church to give whatever they've allotted to give in that budget. So what you're seeing then are commitments as we try and achieve what is a fair approach, what is a sustainable approach. Then in the midst of that, you have two values that are clearly experienced and are trying to be articulated. The one is that each part of the system is committed to taking care of each part. So the regional churches are committed to make sure that the shared national agenda is going to have strong funding. And then the nationwide agenda plan is going to make sure that the regional churches will be strong. So it's a mutual commitment that is very clearly articulated amongst the moderators and the executive staff. Then the other commitment then, another way of expressing that, is to say, once we have achieved the budget in whatever, has been determined, okay, this is fair, this is equitable, this is reasonable, now the numbers are here. That's the budget that we have for our nationwide priorities. It's not a percentage. So if the regional church gets less that year, it doesn't mean that what they give to the nationwide agenda is less by a percentage, right? If, for instance, if we could say it's 60-40, right? We're not assuming that it's a 60-40 commitment and that whatever comes into the regional church, they would send a certain percentage. No, once we've sat down on an annual basis and we've committed to that budget for that fiscal year, the regional churches are going to be committed to that. Now, that may mean that as we negotiate the next fiscal year budget, there's going to have to be change, because that regional church will say, we can't do that again, right? But so that's what you're seeing. You're seeing these values trying to be articulated. We're going to take care of each other, and once we've established a fair budget, then the regional churches are saying, we're committed that year. We're not committing to passing on a certain percentage. We're committed to sending on a certain dollar amount.
Okay, I'm going to test to see whether we're ready to call the question. Those in favor? Okay, sorry, I saw one more person on the microphone there. Two. Okay, so.
Hi, Matt Fraser from Hamilton Mennonite Church. So just to test maybe if I have a correct understanding of what was just said, does that mean that every year every regional church is negotiating what their financial commitment will be, or is there like a reference formula that we're starting from, or are we kind of just bargaining once a year?
I think it's a fair question. I think so. What we're articulating here is that reference point. So we're saying these are the shared priorities, nationwide priorities that we feel committed to as regional churches together. So we want to achieve this. This is what it's going to cost, and so this is how we're going to pay for it. But realistically, because we're caring for each other, if a regional church, says we didn't get the funding we had anticipated, and we've incurred a deficit this year, then because we care for each other, we can't just say, well, tough luck, next year you got to figure it out for yourself. So we do want to, we're committing to being in that conversation to make sure that we're all able to do what we need to do. So.
I just want to add one thing to that. And if you look in the operating agreement, which we discussed recently, there is a section there on what happens if a regional church has a catastrophic failure of income. And there are commitments that we make there to respond to that catastrophic failure. So if you know, David, I'll pick on us. You know, if MCEC falls $20,000 short, that's not a big deal. It can be done. I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not catastrophic. If MCEC was suddenly to have $500,000 short, we got a problem. And so we'd have to do some work midstream to adjust, and there are commitments in the operating agreement to that effect.
Paul Merbecker from Waterloo North Mennonite Church. It seems to me we need to go home from here and do some real creative thinking in terms of our regional conferences. More responsibility, more program is being shifted to us, and it seems to me we need to do some creative thinking. Are we going to need to add staff at the regional level to make up for staff that is being diminished at the national level? Can we possibly, can Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC appoint those part-time mission directors or mission persons? It seems to me this opens up a whole range of new creative possibilities for creative work at the regional level.
Thank you. So I'm just going to test to see whether we're ready to call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, I think we're ready to call the question. So the motion to commend the proposal, the financial planning proposal, is presented on the slide. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those opposed? Okay, carried.
Is that in writing anywhere that I can take back to my congregation and say that this is what we voted on? I need to have that. You can put it up on the website.
Yeah,
Is it there?
We'll make it available.
Where is it? Where do I find it?
Yeah, it's on the website. Our
Now? Can I find it now? Under what thing do I find that?
So we have a Future Directions website.
Okay.
The motions aren't really, but they will be there, right?
I'm going there.
Okay. Okay. So where we now can find the material for the Future Directions Covenant new material, we will be posting the wording of the motions as well.
But it is not worded at this point. It's not posted at this moment.
At this moment, no.
That's what I want to know. But it will be, so that when I go back to my congregation, I can find that, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a mention here too that it'll be the responsibility of the regions also to communicate what has been discussed here back to congregations, not just the individual delegates. Okay, we're going to move on, and I'd like to invite Keith up to walk us through the report on the working group discussions.
Okay, I want to spend a bit of time talking about the feedback that was received from the focus group discussions earlier this afternoon on the working group's reports. So I'm just going to walk through each of them and say a few words. The group on, and I want to preface it by saying what I received ranged from 6 lines of very precise, this is what we said, to 3 pages of perhaps less precise, well, no, precise, this is what we said, but in much more detail. And so I've struggled in some cases to condense it, so I just want to remind some of you that you may not quite recognize your discussion. Accurate, but incomplete. So congregational vitality. And it spoke to 3 highlights from the working group report. The importance of equipping the saints to vitalize and equip people in the pews in their local congregations, sharing our story to vitalize local congregations and understand what vital practices are already present. That's basically taken out of the report. And that resulted then in discussion of challenges faced in congregational life, declining numbers, aging demographics, lack of interest in being resourced and equipped to do things outside of the congregation, the fact that what we're facing doesn't have technical solutions, it has other kinds of solutions, and fears of perhaps of some of the larger congregations that exist around you. And so then the question was, what is there to work with? Vitality is not about size, about the need to have resources that are curated for us so that it's easy to find them, the need for assistance from the regional churches in responding to the new challenges faced by congregational life, and that vitality is rooted in the interest and intent in the congregation, and that we do have people to provide us with resources. The communication working focus group highlighted 3 issues that need to be addressed and spoken to. One is clarification of the Canadian Mennonites' important role, given the polarity between doing journalism and doing promotional material that comes from the nationwide church, and some desire in various parts of the church for either editorial control or greater oversight of the Canadian Mennonite as a magazine. The questions of budget, increased budget requirements for regional church communications, and questions of what is equity in the distribution of that money for those regional churches. The importance of accessibility for everyone to have access to the communication material that's being done. So a couple of concerns that were identified, one about language of our materials for newcomer congregations, about how online, increasing use of online communication disenfranchises certain people, the impact that social media has on our conversations. Thus, for example, my comments about being unfiltered earlier today and remembering that I was being live streamed. And the regional church role in mediating between the congregation and the nationwide church. Canadian Witness identified 2 points. One is the importance of a continuation of full-time Indigenous settler relations position at the national level. And the second one is the importance of attending to the question of how we do witness in the Canadian context, in our Canadian communities. And what are those forms of witness that we already engage in at the local and regional level? The Vision and Identity group actually was divided into 2 groups, and so there's 2 sets of feedback. One of them spoke of 4 threads that were in their conversation. A shared sense that this vision identity needs to be a priority, the need to be intentional about what that means, the importance of not neglecting the camps and the schools and other agencies in shaping our identity as a nationwide people, and the need to really flesh out what it means to be a nationwide people together. And yet, sorry, I love technology except when something pops up on my screen. The other group identified a number of things, and I've just highlighted what seemed to be some of the significant ones. The fears of loss that continue to be present in our church as we make changes, the need for intentionality in shaping ourselves as a nationwide community, the sharing of stories and the importance of that, similar to the kinds of stories we've been hearing this weekend together, the need for inspiration connected to what it is that the nationwide church does. How do we speak inspirationally about what is happening there? What holds us, the question is, what holds us together when times get tough? When we have difficult conversations or we have to struggle to maintain our life as a church, what holds us together? And then learning together how to live as Anabaptists within our own context. The working group, the focus group that discussed the community of spiritual leadership, essentially approached their question of advice and counsel by asking a very lengthy series of questions, and questions that need to be paid attention to as we move towards implementing this concept. And the group seemed to take as a given that the community of spiritual leadership has an important role to play in the life of the church. So a few key questions. How does that group work with Mennonite Church Canada and the regional churches? What happens with what is discussed and discerned there? What are the connections with schools? What is on the table for discussion and discernment? Is this the primary place for doing our discernment work together? What is discernment? My guess is we could probably have about 400 views on that in this group of 399 people. And what is the relationship of the community of spiritual leadership with the area church ministers? And then finally, international witness. I spoke to that earlier. I've filtered them a little bit, and so I'll repeat them. To draw on the expertise of workers and partners, the need for strong collaboration with the regional churches. If we do work with MWC, then we also need to work at providing additional resources. Mennonite Church Canada as manager or oversight of the work, the importance of relational funding, the need to lodge this international witness at both the regional and the nationwide level, the importance of freeing up congregational resources so that we can have a robust theology of mission that is sensitive to the questions of colonialism. The workers need job security, meaning that it's important to have clarity in our funding model. The importance of attending to the overlap between international witness of MC Canada and partner agencies, or perhaps I would say other church agencies who are also working in the international context. And then clarifying what it is that was picked up from the working group report into the document that you have as the proposal. That was fast, and you probably only caught 10%.
We would just like to make a point of clarification in response to hearing the request for hard copies, paper copies of the motions. At the close of today's assembly, we will have paper copies of the motions. And so we'll have a limited number of copies. I think we're going to make about 100 copies, but they will summarize the motions that we have voted on here over the course of the assembly. So if you would wish to have a copy, just please come to the front here and we'll have those copies available to you. So moving on to the working group and witness proposal discussion, we now want to hear your feedback on the working group summaries as well as on the witness proposal. So once again, if you wish to speak, please stand and we'll have one of our ushers have a microphone to you. Okay, if I can also have... one
I'm
moment.
good now.
Okay, excellent. Just one moment. If we can have the... okay, Keith's going to take care of that. We're just going to have the motion projected on the screen so that everyone can see it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Jeff Friesen, Charleswood Mennonite Church here in Winnipeg. But I'm speaking more as the chair of the Canadian Witness Working Group. And so this isn't regarding the witness motion. This is regarding the reports on the working group. I just want to say I found it fairly regrettable that the people involved in the working groups weren't allowed to attend or were encouraged not to attend their focus conversations. I believe that would have allowed for a more robust conversation to have in those rooms, as we would have been able to further contextualize what was written in the report. For example, for the Canadian Witness Working Group, the comment about attending to witness in the Canadian context, we spoke about that in the working group report, and I would have gladly spoken to that further in that room as well, but we didn't have that chance. And I understand the need for allowing people to speak freely and not feel concerned about hurting others if they want to be critical about a piece. But I believe that our people are good enough and strong enough that they could have been in those rooms in good ways.
Thank you. So at the moment, we have the international witness proposal up. Because we can only show one at a time at any particular time, we'll just have those alternating, allowing people to see the wording on these two motions.
I'm John Peters from Charleswood Mennonite Church here in Winnipeg. I've had this niggling concern about one possible scenario. And the scenario I'm thinking of is that there is a very energetic and exciting individual in a congregation who comes up with what he thinks or she thinks is a very tremendous idea, and convinces the congregation that that is a good idea, and the congregation brings it forward to the regional church. And so it generates some support there, and they bring it to the national office for coordination, for vetting, and so on. Now, if the terms of reference or the criteria by which the national body approves or disapproves such an action says, no, this is not a very good idea, it puts a real damper on the chain of actions down the line and could create quite a tension between, say, the congregation who is thinking that it is a great idea and the national coordinating office not thinking that way. So I think there's something that we should be aware of and maybe take action that could be precluded. The other concern I have, if I might add a second one, and that is the way I read the document now, that there will be initiatives from the individuals in the congregation as I have outlined, but we have had international witness presence in various countries for a long period of time. And those are structured in collaboration with national entities out there in the global world. And so we're going to have this influx of ideas here, and yet we have had ongoing programs for a long period of time, which are well thought out of. They have been planned and they're working, functioning well. Where is the balance going to be drawn, and how is that tension going to be dealt with?
Thank you.
So to your first point, I think that there's certainly concern that ideas that are brought forward, you're right, if a good idea or a congregation perceives an idea to have merit in it and it doesn't pass the test at the national level, there's certainly an opportunity there for some negative feelings to come from that. I think the key there is communication. I don't know a single person in the room who probably in their life has never heard the word no before. But I think it's how the no gets delivered. Do you understand why the idea didn't have the merit, and was it explained to you clearly, and was there an opportunity for you to hear that versus getting an email response back that says, thanks for your great idea, but we don't like it, so too bad, so sad. No is still the same answer, but how you deliver the no is really important. So no will be the words that get heard sometimes. It's in the spirit in which it gets explained that's important. Second point, or see Gary getting up there, but okay. Your second point, what was it missing on the second one? Sorry. You had two. Yes, so the goal is not to rescind every good program that is going on out there and replace it with new ideas that we've created. I think that the hope would be that those programs that continue to do good work and also have the merit and have the financial support, that we can keep a number of those vibrant and going, and so that would be the hope.
Okay, on my left first, and then on my right.
Raphael Dirksen, Springfield Mennonite Church, Winnipeg. So the way I understand it, after Kyle and Willard's exchanged a couple times, Springfield Heights keeps giving their normal giving that they would have been giving to the two conferences, now to one regional church that passes it forward to the national level. Which means that if we don't give more as designated towards international witness, and everybody does that international witness, budget is effectively cut. But the question that's outstanding for me is one that was mentioned in the working group paper, which asks this. One question which the interim council is concerning is how designated donations to international ministries should be treated. Should they be accounted in a way that primarily benefits the area church or international ministries? Now, the report here from the working group said that the interim council seems to be leaning in the direction of accounting for designated donations to international ministry in such a way that the area church would be the primary beneficiary. I would like an answer to where that is at and where that's going to go forward from now. What's going to happen with designated donations to international witness? Thank you.
So that was in the report because that was in part where thinking was at the time that the report was written. You can chalk this up to another place where responses from various parts of the church resulted in a change of mind. And so we've actually, the discussions lately we've flipped that in the other direction. So that if I were to write a check for $50,000 designated to an international witness project, that money would go to the international witness project, and MCEC's contribution to Mennonite Church Canada would not be reduced by that amount.
Gary Jansen, Executive Minister, Mennonite Church, BC. I did want to follow through a little further on what Paul was saying before about the question of if somebody comes with a great idea, apparently a great idea in the local congregation, and then it goes to conversations with the regional church. That's where I was going to catch it, because the regional church leadership will have staff who are fully aware of the grid that is being worked through for discernment with regard to witness projects, and also will be fully aware of the international partners that are looking for projects, and they can have that conversation in the region to help clarify the best practices of a great idea that's coming forward and maybe shaped into something. It may go maybe to a different continent where there's actually a call for this kind of work to be done, or that would, I think, would be happening in the region well before it came. And then the national discussion is representative of what's happening in the region. So the national discussion is always a discussion that's coming out of the conversation from people in the regions. And so I don't think it's going to, have to hit this national place with any surprises that weren't already part of the conversation long before.
Thank you.
My name's Lydia Crutwell from First United Mennonite Church in Vancouver. I just want to speak a word of encouragement that a couple of times now I've heard, well, the working group report said that, and we heard the feedback, and so here's the direction we're going. And I commend you on that. It's easy, especially for working groups. You've gotten an idea in your head, and you've talked about it, and then to hear other people coming back and be like, no, we like our idea. So I commend the humility it takes to reverse directions on things. And also, we've had a lot of questions. We've had a lot of questions asked, and we haven't necessarily had all the answers because we need to vote on a thing before we can figure out more and go the next step in the process. But, and that's part of it. And there's a discomfort to not always having all the answers that we're hoping for. But that's part of life, I think. And it's also, I'm encouraged by the quality and the depth of questions that are being asked. I think for me, I am concerned if there aren't answers and there aren't being good questions asked. I'm not concerned if we don't have answers yet, but we're asking good and right questions. So thank you for asking good questions.
Thank you.
Tom Yoder-Neufeld, delegate from First Mennonite. I have two quick comments or observations. One is that at the Saskatoon Assembly, we committed ourselves to congregational discernment before this comes to a vote. And my understanding is, and I may need to be corrected here, that given the shortened timeline, one of the ways that was seen to be arranged for was through the working groups. And I'm aware today, for instance, that not nearly everyone who's here has read all of the working groups' reports. So I would encourage strongly that those continue to be made available to congregations so that they can give ongoing input to the Joint Council as planning happens, rather than to see their work to have ended at this point. The second point has to do with the mission or witness working group. I know that Keith had a very, very short time to look at them, and I wanted to highlight a point that I think may have gotten a little bit garbled along the way. And that is, a point I expressed there. I think one of the underlying needs we have as a church at all levels is to attend to what we might call a theology of mission. I think we're not on the same page when we use the word witness or mission, and I'm not suggesting that we should be or can be, but I have a hunch that paying close attention to that would help form a basis that would then be reflected in the monies that people would be eager to offer. I think part of the problem is that we're not sure when we knock on the door and they answer what it is that we have to say. And so I would strongly urge that this be put on perhaps the agenda for future study conferences and so on, to really wrestle with the question, what does it mean for us as a church to respond to Christ's call when he sends us with the Great Commission?
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to test with you to see whether we're ready to call the question. Those in favor of calling the question, please raise your hands. Those opposed? Okay, we're going to call the question on working groups and witness proposal. So those in favor, please raise your hands. Oh, sorry. The first one would be for working group. Those in favor of working groups proposal, please raise your hands. Those opposed? Okay, the next one is international witness. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Those opposed? Carried. I'm going to now turn it over to Aldred, who will offer and moderate the nomination slate. Aldred.
It's been a long sit, and we're coming to the last part here, and this is, I'm inviting the nominations committee forward. It's Marguerite and any of your other members of your committee that may be here to present the nomination slate.
Last night I forgot, or I neglected to mention who's all on our committee. And Waldo Neufeld and Eric Rempel are here tonight. If you can stand, at least so that people can see you.
There.
Is Eric here?
Eric.
No. I don't.
He was here.
No, he was here, but maybe not now. I also wanted to recognize Marilyn Sayre and Renata Clausen was our chair. They are not here tonight, but they helped a lot in this process. Anyways, we have not received any other nominations since last night. So I would like to present Calvin Kwan as moderator, Alan Hebert as secretary treasurer, and Geraldine Balzer as assistant moderator as nominees for, I'd like to make a motion that we accept these nominees for approval. Thanks.
We have a motion. If you've had the background in the Covenant New Program Guide, page 11, and a description of each of those. Have we a seconder for that motion? Seconder is Ryan. Name and congregation, please. And Sam. Any questions? No.
Okay. Just one comment. I noticed on Alan's description you've got treasurer, secretary, and if that's sort of a business model, president, secretary of a company, that sounds fine. But if you're expecting the treasurer to also be the recording secretary, and I know Willard alluded to staff being helpful to that, but in my experience they are helpful to that, but I'm not sure that isn't too much work for one person if you're going to get them, or you're minimizing the work of all the previous recording secretaries in my mind. But anyway, just to keep that in mind, I'm not saying it changes anything now, but
right.
It's streamlined. But I just want to bring that up, that you guys keep that in mind when you dole out the
Comment noted. Okay. Comment noted, and I won't be on the next board. Any other comments? Are you ready for the question? All in favor signify by raising your hands. Oh, you're showing ballot. We don't know. We don't need a ballot. If there were contested, so we're voting for or against the slate. It's an up and down vote. Yeah. So it's that's straightforward. Had there been other nominees, then we would have gone into a balloted vote. So again, are we in favor of the slate? Hands raised, please. Opposed, same sign. Carried, NIMCOM. Thank you. I return it back to our chair.
Okay, as mentioned previously, we do have paper copies of all the resolutions that we have decided on, and that's just here right in front of me on the table. So please, if you would like to have a copy of that, you can help yourself. Before we move to our closing ceremony, I just want to invite our resolutions committee to come forward to offer 2 resolutions at this time.
We have 2 closing resolutions that are not going to require any discussion. Resolution number 1. Whereas putting together an event of this magnitude has required the hard work and commitment of many people, and whereas this assembly in particular is in addition to the normal functioning of Mennonite Church Canada, we extend our heartfelt thanks to all those involved in the planning, organization, and implementation of this special assembly. We are grateful for the hotel staff who have served us well and kept us fed. We are grateful to the worship committee who have led us in powerful ways through worship and reflection, which has helped shape our conversation. We extend our thanks to all the delegates who came from across the country, from different backgrounds and ages, devoting their weekend to discuss the future of our church. All in favor?
And our second resolution. Whereas this assembly brings to a close a long and difficult process and the beginning of a new journey, we thank those who have worked diligently, meeting together, writing documents, and taking time to listen. We want to extend our gratitude to the General Board, Mennonite Church Canada staff, area church staff and volunteers, congregations who have taken time to consider and discuss, those who sat on working or reference groups, and everyone that participated in this process at any level. We realize that people may have been hurt during this process, and that there are those who are excited for what is to come. We want to thank those whose formal roles have now finished, whether volunteered or employed. We acknowledge your hard work and commitment to the church. We thank our leaders who continue to revise and work with these new structures. We commit to pray for this continued process and those who will bring it into being. All in favor?
Thank you. I now invite our worship team to come forward to lead us in worship.
I just have to turn it on.
I'm just going to say, you don't have to read anything.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, no, it's not. No, which one is it? As we enter into our closing worship for this evening, let's turn to hymnal worship book number 42. Please stand.
Blessed are you, O God. May our worship be a delight.
Spirit
We're on. Grant, if you could cue the first of the slides, so it's on. Thank you. We want to pick up where the Resolutions Committee finished off with a litany of thanks for faithful leaders and committed staff. As an executive committee, we felt that it would be appropriate for the board, the executive committee, to be giving these thanks as part of a worship service. So between Calvin and myself, we will lead you in a litany. It comes in two parts. One is for faithful leaders and the other for the committed staff. And on the first part, there is a responsive part, the dark print you will be invited to participate in. So, just friends and sisters, brothers in Christ. This weekend we resolved to change how we work together on God's mission for this time in history. And that intent is worth a celebration. To borrow the words from a brother in Christ, Pope Francis, Christian doctrine is not a closed system. It has a face that is not rigid. It has a body that moves and grows. It has soft flesh. It's called Jesus Christ. That we've come to this point is worth celebrating. So we invite you to join in this litany.
We give thanks to God for the many leaders we have in our church, for their countless hours of prayer, reflection, debate, and work in discerning how we can reimagine what it means to be followers of Jesus Christ in our time. We give thanks, O God. We give thanks for the faithfulness, care, and love put into their tasks by our national board and councils as listed in the program guide, and those not listed such as the Faith and Life Committee, our area church boards and committees, the interim council, the more than 80 who served on the working groups, those in the Emerging Voices Initiative, and the many other leaders. We give thanks, O God. God has wondrously gifted each one of us here and those joining from afar diverse gifts that enrich and challenge our understanding of what it means to be a witness in the image of Jesus. We give thanks, O God. We know our work has just begun, that new muscles and habits have to develop, to root ourselves in Christ anew, to be a body that moves and grows in new ways, to respond to guidance by the Spirit with genius and creativity. We remind ourselves of our vision that God calls us to be followers of Jesus Christ, and by the power of the Holy Spirit, to grow as communities of grace, joy, and peace, so that God's healing and hope flow through us to the world. Amen.
We also give thanks for committed staff. While many of us celebrate the change and the new vision, there's a shadow side to our actions. For most of us coming to this decision, we made a contribution of our ideas, experience, prayers, but we're not immediately affected. We return to our regular lives, resolving to support our new approach in the best way we can. For our staff, particularly our staff of Mennonite Church Canada, including our international witness workers, it's a commitment with direct implications for their lives and families. Their jobs became vulnerable. We all know that. They had to live with it. These past several years have not been easy, particularly once the writing was on the wall that significant change was in the offing. Living with uncertainty has been stressful, and I think most of us can identify that from our own experiences. Now, for some staff, God opened other doors and called them in different directions. Some others were committed to continuing in their roles, and yet were asked to leave because of failing finances. It's gut-wrenching to consider layoffs particularly in a church organization, and yet sometimes it can't be avoided. To our former staff in both these categories and their families, we say thank you. Thank you on behalf of all of us. Thank you for the many contributions you made and continue to make to our work as a church community in pursuing God's mission. And then there are the staff who continue in their roles to this day, those who have continued to live with uncertainty, carrying out their duties and responsibilities even as our organizational foundations were shaking, going the extra mile, open to taking on new tasks and roles, all despite the prospect of job loss or change. To you in particular, we say, on behalf of all of us, thank you for your integrity in keeping the mission you've been assigned in the forefront. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your flexibility. You have been on a noble quest, even as you knew your position could well become to an end.
We want to recognize you individually, so as we read your name, please stand and remain standing. Ryan Roth Bartel, lead graphic designer. Tara Davies, executive assistant. Dan Dick, director, church engagement communications. Arlen Friesen-Epp, Common Word resource. Deborah Fraze, director, news services. Tim Fraze, executive minister, witness. Steve Heinrichs, director, Indigenous Relations. Gord Jansen, Director, Asia, Europe, and Middle East Ministry. Grant Clausen, Web Servant. Naomi Clausen, Bookkeeper and Accounts Payable Administrator. Jason Martin, Director, Partnership Development, Eastern Canada. Ingrid Miller, Administrative Assistant, International Ministries and National Ministries. Anna Sarah Rojas, Administrative Assistant, Common Word. Karina Stewart, Chief Administrative Officer. Janelle Thiessen Van Eck, Receptionist and Administrative Assistant. Hippolito Shamanga, Director, Africa, Europe, and Latin America Ministry. Tanny Workington, Short-Term Ministry Coordinator. Laura Zacharias, Coordinator, Payroll and Benefits Accounting. Willard Metzger, Executive Director. Please remain standing as we move into prayer. And perhaps I could ask if there are those who are standing, if you're near them, perhaps you can stand with them. And we're just going to move in a prayer of thanks for them. And in a spirit of appreciation, solidarity, I just ask that we stand with our staff.
We thank you, God, for all the gifts made available to your church through our sisters and brothers who have served as staff, for their time and dedication to our common mission in the name of Christ, for energy and passion brought to your work even though uncertainty and change was a present reality. We ask forgiveness for times we may have forgotten this. Lord, we ask you to walk alongside and bless those staff who have already transitioned to new roles, and especially those who will be. May your ever-loving Spirit surround each one with strength, comfort, and hope in the future to which you are calling them. And as we move forward together, may you unite us and remind us of your presence within and with us. With the saints who have gone before, we place our trust in you, O God. In Jesus' name, amen.
response, number 98 in Sing the Journey. We invite you to join us on the verses, and we'll sing the refrain through together a few times at the beginning.
I invite you to turn in your blue hymnals, if you can grab one and share with those beside you. Turn to number 795. In trust and hope, we want to commission those new volunteers that we know of that have committed to lead us forth into all manner of things, with the hope and the prayer that all will be well. So I ask those that we know of who are moving, so I know of the Joint Council and the people on FPAC, I invite you to stand, and there's a part for you to read there as well. I invite everyone to read the people and everyone to read all. Let's read together. In company with your faithful people in every age, we have called out those with gifts for your service, O God. Fill them with the love of Christ and the power of the Spirit as they carry out the church's ministry. For the ministries taking form within us, and for all the callings that are yet to be, we praise your name, O Lord. Amen.
We have one more song this evening called Sing a New Church. It's to a hymn tune that you will probably recognize. So I want us to think about the words that we're singing and how they speak to us in the situation we find ourselves in. Let's stand together.
Summoned by the God who made us,
seated.
This is the last time you'll see me up here doing announcements. So most of these are based on questions people asked me, and then I tried to find the answer. Tomorrow morning, worship is at the Met. I'm from Winnipeg, and I'd never heard of this. Metropolitan, it's an old opera house. It is basically just around the corner, I have no idea directions, on Donald. It's awesome. Apparently, it's like an old opera house. You need your name tag to come in, so remember, bring your name tags. Though if you are not coming tomorrow, make sure to hand in your name tags tonight. Then some people were asking about checking out tomorrow and where to do with luggage. Checkout is at noon, so you can go to worship and be back to check out, so leave your luggage in your room. That hopefully can work. Yesterday there was several people who had issues with getting out of the car park. I've heard many reasons as to why. You can pay, before you leave the building, pay in the lobby and then go to the car park to leave. That should alleviate the long lineups that happened yesterday. I was 15 minutes, I heard some were 45. And lastly, there's been a lot of sitting, not much physical activity. So we have some opportunities for physical activity. Helping clean up. So the stuff that was brought, the hymnals and a lot of the music stuff needs to be cleaned up. So there is, if you can bring your hymnals, take both hymnals out in the hallway. There's boxes there labeled for the blue hymnal or for the Sing the Journey that you can put them in. They're out in the hallway. The volunteers, ushers, or whatever will guide you in that. Then we also need volunteers to help carry those boxes out to the cars. After they're all full, we need some volunteers to carry the boxes. We need some volunteers, okay, so I got this right. We need some volunteers to carry the boxes. They're not too heavy if you take one at a time. We need a few volunteers to carry this cross. It's from Bethel Mennonite Church, and it needs to go home because we're not worshiping here tomorrow.
No, it needs to go to the Met. So it needs to go down the stairs across the alley to the Met for tomorrow morning.
It needs to go to the Met. It needs to leave this room. So we need about 4 or 5.
Yeah, that'd be good.
4 or 5 people. It needs to be carried down 11 flights of stairs.
Or the car ramp.
Or the car ramp. So it needs to be carried 11 flights down, either stairs or ramp. So let's get out of here in half an hour. Then also the music equipment up here needs to be carried downstairs. A stand, if you're going down to the lobby, this is going to the lobby.
Come and grab some stuff from us. We'll give it to you, and then you can go down the elevator and take it across the alley to the Met.
Oh yes, you'll take it to the Met, exactly. So you can carry a stand if you're heading out. The piano might take a few more people. That's all I have for announcements. I'll turn it over to the worship team for benediction. Oh, Cal.
This then concludes Mennonite Church Canada's 2017 Special Delegate Gathering. I wish to thank you for the time you took to be present. As per our bylaws, the next regular delegate gathering will be in spring or early summer of 2018. It will be the smaller delegate gathering. And in 2019, we look forward to an engaging time with you in our first study conference, proposed in Alberta, when together we can worship God, reunite in fellowship, and engage in conversations on matters important to the church. Blessings to you as you engage in God's mission for the church. The sessions of the 2017 Mennonite Church Canada Special Delegate Assembly are now closed.
Thanks. Oh, there you go. Thank you, Calvin. Man, all this stuff that we got to take down, just imagine what it was like bringing it up here. On behalf of the worship planning team and all us here, we just want to say thank you for giving your voices and for joining us in worship. It was so powerful to have all of us sing together. And yeah, the best is yet to come tomorrow morning as we gather around the Lord's table to celebrating communion. So we're looking very much forward to that. Why don't we stand as we close in a benediction? Jesus gives us an invitation. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. We need rest. We need rest from all the sitting and the talking, listening, arguing, discerning, eating, laughing, crying, letting go, and dreaming. Go to the one who can give you that rest, Jesus Christ. Go in peace. Amen.